April 9th, 1241, a field outside the town of Legnica in what is now southwestern Poland. Henry the Pious, Duke of Silesia, commander of the largest allied army Central Europe could assemble, is dead. His head is on a spear. The Mongols are parading it outside the city walls so the people inside understand what has happened. 2 days later, 400 miles southeast, the King of Hungary watches his army of 65,000 men get cut apart in a single morning. King Bela IV runs, not strategically retreats, runs. He will not stop running for months. Vienna has no defenders. Paris is 12 riding days away. The Pope is writing letters. The Holy Roman Emperor is hiding in his castle and also writing letters. Here is what no one teaches you. Not a single major power in Western Europe was capable of stopping what was coming, but something stopped it anyway. One man died in a palace 6,000 miles east of Vienna in the steppes of central Mongolia, and every Mongol soldier in Europe packed up, turned around, and went home. By the end of this video, you will know exactly why, and you will never think about the word luck the same way again. If stories like this, the ones that schools somehow forgot to teach, if those are what you're here for, subscribe. It's free, and there are 30 more empires on this channel waiting for you, each one stranger than the last. Now, let's go back to the beginning. To understand why one man's death in Mongolia saved Europe, you need to understand who that man was. His name was Ögedei, and he was the second great Khan, son of Genghis, chosen personally by his father to hold the empire together after Genghis died. And here is the thing about Ögedei that history tends to underestimate. He was not his father. He was not a battlefield general. He was an administrator, a politician, a man who turned a collection of conquered territories into a functioning empire with roads, postal systems, and religious tolerance. He was also a profound alcoholic. His own advisors tried to limit him to a fixed number of cups per day. He cheated by drinking from larger cups. In 1235, 6 years before the events in Poland, Ögedei ordered what historians now call the Great Western Campaign. He gave command to 2 men, his nephew Batu Khan, who would lead politically, and Subutai, who would lead militarily. Subutai was, at this point in history, arguably the greatest living military commander on earth. He was old, nearly blind, so heavy he had to be carried into battle in a palanquin, a covered litter like a portable throne. He had never lost a battle, not one. In 40 years of campaigns across 3 continents, Subutai had an unbroken record. In 1237, the army entered Kievan Rus, the civilization that would one day become Russia and Ukraine. They moved in winter, which no one did, because the frozen rivers became highways for cavalry. City after city fell. Kiev, one of the largest cities in Europe at the time, was reduced to rubble. An estimated 500,000 people died in the Rus campaign alone. By early 1241, the army crossed into Poland and Hungary simultaneously. 2 fronts. Both won within days of each other. It was at Legnica that Henry the Pious assembled everything Central Europe had. Templars, Teutonic Knights, Polish cavalry, German infantry. Henry himself rode at the front. The Mongols killed them all in a few hours. Henry's body was identified afterward only because his widow knew he had a 6th toe on his left foot. The Archdeacon Thomas of Split, a Croatian clergyman who watched Mongol riders reach the Adriatic coast, wrote in his chronicle that the people of his city believed the end of the world had come. He was not wrong to think so. Here is what most people don't know about what happened next. The army stopped, not because of resistance, not because of terrain, not because of disease or supply lines. The army was functional, fed, and winning. Subutai had already mapped the routes west. Vienna was the next target, then the Rhine, then, presumably, everything. They stopped because of a letter. December 11th, 1241. Ögedei Khan, the man who ordered this entire campaign, the man who built the postal roads that connected Mongolia to Hungary, the man who kept the empire from fracturing after his father's death, died in his palace at Karakorum. The official cause was drinking. The unofficial cause, depending on which historian you ask, was also drinking. The news reached Batu Khan in Hungary sometime in the early weeks of 1242. And here's where everything you think you know about this story falls apart. This is not a story about Europe being saved by heroism. This is not a story about the Mongols being stopped by anything Europe did or built or prayed for. This is a story about Mongol succession politics and a general who was furious about the outcome. When a great Khan died, the Mongol Empire required a kurultai, a great council of all the senior princes and commanders. Every major figure had to return to Mongolia to vote on the next ruler. Batu Khan was not just a general. He was Ögedei's nephew, a grandson of Genghis, and one of the most powerful men in the empire. If he stayed in Hungary, he forfeited his chance to influence who sat on the throne. So he left. Simple as that. He packed the army and marched east. The Persian historian Juvayni, who had access to the Mongol court and whose chronicle is one of our primary sources for this period, recorded that Batu wept when the news of Ögedei's death arrived in Hungary. Whether those were tears of grief or political calculation, Juvayni doesn't say. Subutai, by all accounts, was furious. Pay attention to what happens next, because this is the quiet tragedy at the center of the whole story. Subutai had spent 40 years building to this moment. He had a mapped route west. He had an army that had beaten every force Europe could produce. He knew, with the certainty of a man who had never lost, that the campaign was winnable. Vienna would fall. The Rhine would be crossed. Whatever lay beyond the Rhine, he would deal with. And he was ordered to stop. He obeyed, because that was what Subutai did. He served the empire. The empire needed him in Mongolia for the succession. So he went. He never campaigned in Europe again. He died in 1248, still in Mongol service, somewhere in China. The campaign he was forced to abandon was the only one he never finished. The succession crisis that followed Ögedei's death lasted 4 years. 4 years of political paralysis, competing factions, a regent holding the empire together by force of will. By the time a new great Khan was confirmed, Guyuk, Ögedei's son, in 1246, the political situation in the West had shifted. Batu and Guyuk hated each other. The Western campaign was not relaunched. Then Guyuk died after 18 months. More paralysis, more politics, and then something unexpected happened. The window closed, not with a dramatic battle, not with a heroic last stand. It closed with paperwork and politics and the death of a heavy drinker in a palace in the middle of Asia. The Mongols did eventually raid into Poland again, in 1259, 1260, 1287, but never with the full Western army, never with Subutai, never with the intent to stay. Today, the town of Legnica in southwestern Poland is a quiet city of about 90,000 people. It has a market square, a Gothic church, a tram line that runs past a park. There is a small monument to the Battle of Legnica, a plaque, modest, easy to miss. Most people who live there don't spend much time thinking about April 9th, 1241. Why would they? It was 800 years ago. But if you stand in that square, you are standing on the specific patch of earth where the westward expansion of the largest land empire in human history effectively ended. Not because anyone stopped it, because a man 6,000 miles east drank himself to death and his nephew needed to go home to vote. That is the part of history that school never taught you. Here are the 3 things to take with you. First, the Mongols didn't lose. That distinction matters. When the army left Europe in 1242, it was undefeated. Subutai went home with a perfect record. Europe didn't win anything. It simply stopped being the priority. Second, the fragility of what we call Western civilization is far more real than the story we tell ourselves. The idea that Europe was too strong, too Christian, too civilized to fall, that is a story invented after the fact. In the winter of 1241, Europe had no answer. The answer came from inside the Mongol Empire, not from outside it. Third, and this one lingers, imagine being King Bela IV of Hungary. You are on a boat. The Croatian coast is behind you. You have watched your kingdom get destroyed. You are running out of coastline to flee to. And then you look up, and the Mongol riders who have been hunting you for months are standing on a cliff above the harbor. They stop. They look at you. They turn around. They ride away. You never find out why. You spend the rest of your life rebuilding Hungary. You die in 1270, having rebuilt it well. But you never learn that the thing that saved you was a drinking problem in Mongolia. Which city do you think falls first if Ögedei lives another 5 years? Paris, Vienna, or Rome? Drop your answer below. I read every one. And if you want more of this, the politics, the humans, the stories underneath the empires, subscribe. There are decades of Asian history on this channel, and every single story is one that schools somehow forgot to teach. See you in the next one.